Okay, it is 12 o'clock here in the Midwest of the US, so we're going to get started. I'm Andrea Hill. I'm CEO of Hill Management Group and the Works brands. We serve the jewelry industry from mine to market with business and marketing consulting and training and digital marketing services. But in this context, I'm also MJSA's designer advocate, and I work with MJSA to produce this webinar series. We've been doing this series for 2 years now, usually every third Thursday. But during the COVID-19 crisis, we bumped it up, and we've been offering a webinar every single week and opened it up to the entire jewelry industry. So I'd like to start by thanking MJSA for their fabulous support of jewelry industry education through their MJSA journal and all of their events and everything they do for us, including these webinars. So thanks, MJSA. I have noticed that we have this presentation was sort of tuned for the American market, but I've noticed we have a lot of attendees today from Europe and the Middle East and Asia. So I will definitely make sure that I'm tipping it where it's starting to look too localized to cover all of the different areas. So welcome to all of our international participants. Some of you are up pretty late in the evening. We'll have one of my colleagues from Italy on the webinar with us today. He's up late too, so I really appreciate all of you attending. This last month has been a crazy flurry of activity with all of us in all of our different countries trying to figure, or last several months now, trying to figure out how to cope with these dramatic changing conditions. And so what we're trying to do with this webinar series is begin to anticipate what the world will be like when the situation passes. I'm not even sure that the situation passes. I think we evolved to a new normal. Right now, everything's changing by the day. We could have the same conversation in a month with some new insights. So we just need to keep exploring the details and keeping an open mind to what's happening. Nearly everyone on this call is the leader of a business. And one of the primary responsibilities of a leader is to anticipate future events and plan accordingly. We need to peer into the future and try to imagine what it might be like to live in that future. So that's what we're going to try to do today. The coronavirus is certainly novel, but the economic impacts of the virus, oh, I should switch to share my screen with you, shouldn't I? There, can you guys see the screen okay? Let me know. Slides coming through all right now? Somebody hit that chat box, so I'm sure you can see it. Thank you, Cecilia. Okay, great. Hi, Susan. Okay, so the coronavirus is novel, but the economic impacts are not necessarily novel. Well, shutting down the economy, that was totally unprecedented. But and right now the economy is suffering this world of instant dramatic hurt, and that's going to introduce a lot of new dynamics to our economic and social life, and of course the way we do business. But that's not all that's happening here. Major crises have a long history of intensifying existing trends. So if we view the moment we are in as entirely novel, we're not going to see the trends and context that were already in place. So today we're going to look at both the existing trends that are likely to be intensified and also the new challenges that have been introduced, and use that context as a way of imagining what is going to happen in our global manufacturing and supply chain existence as a jewelry industry. Now, nobody today has the answers to what's going to happen in manufacturing and supply chains and sales. All we have are questions. So my goal today is to frame the problem and ask questions in a way that can get all of us thinking and starting to imagine the scenarios that will start playing out as we navigate our way through this experience. If you have questions, please put them into the chat box or write them down. Don't forget them. We'll leave lots of time at the end for questions and answers. So as I just pointed out, major crises tend to intensify existing trends. So I want to start by spending just a few minutes looking at the industry's modern trend line based on our most recent 5 disruptions, because we've had 5 disruptions over the last 30 years. And this historical context helps provide the beginning of the trend lines that we're going to forecast out now. So like I said, there have been 5 major disruptions to our industry. 3 of them have been in the past 20 years. People tend to think of the internet as the main disruption before COVID-19, of course, and then only in terms of price pressure and retail competition. But thinking that way can really leave you blind to the changes we've just been through. So let's take, well, just been through, in my context, 30 years, that's what we've just been through. Some of you are a lot younger and that seems like ancient history. But now we're going to take a look at these disruptions and their impact on our industry and the opportunities each one presented, as well as how they affect us now going forward. So you'll have the slides from this presentation when we're done. Don't worry about trying to memorize everything that I say. Just take in the information. You'll get the video replay. You'll get the slides. So you can refer to all of that later. So let's look at the first disruption. It was in the 1980s. It was the labor arbitrage disruption. And labor arbitrage is simply the act of moving your production to someplace where you get lower cost labor. And that happened as regulatory and transportation and technology barriers to international trade disintegrated. And the jewelry industry joined nearly every other industry in moving production to low labor cost countries. Especially at the beginning of that, lead times became longer because we were spending a lot of time working out production challenges in societies that didn't have a strong jewelry production history, but also, which is not true, like in India, they've been producing jewelry for millennia, but they weren't doing mechanized jewelry production. So we were working through all of these challenges with how do we get consistent jewelry production? How do we train up large labor forces to do jewelry production? That made the jewelry industry much less agile in the 1980s and 1990s. We actually slowed down. It was also the beginning of commoditization. So as we introduced CAD to the jewelry manufacturing experience, CAD's much more facile today than it was in the 1980s. And we were limited by what CAD could do. And that actually limited some of our design potential. So we saw the beginning of so that made jewelry more basic, which made jewelry more comparable across the board. And anytime you've got a product that look and perform the same way, the only thing left you have to compete on is price, right? So then we started commoditizing our jewelry. And our smaller production operations became less competitive in terms of price. So that was the first disruption, and it was huge. The impacts of the first disruption are still playing out today. So for instance, we had this race to the bottom in price, and now we have jewelry price resistance. That's that commoditization impact. We also have a really interesting impact that nobody anticipated then, which is a shortage of jewelers. So now the training environment for jewelers has been almost completely eliminated because we don't have domestic, now I'm talking about the US, domestic training. Even in Italy, I work in Italy. Italy's got this fabulous training history for jewelers, but it's getting harder and harder to find trained jewelry professionals, even in places like Italy. So across the world, as we pursued this labor arbitrage strategy, we reduced the training for jewelry artisans in local countries. And that's going to affect us as we deal with relocalizing some of our manufacturing. It was already affecting us before COVID-19. The 1990s brought the second big disruption, and that's what I call the logistics technology disruption. So suddenly we had all of this computer automation and technology that allowed us to do packaging more easily and more affordably. Manufacturers could package smaller units or smaller collections of things, whereas in the past, only selling by the pallet or the caseload was possible. That was all transferred into the jewelry industry as well. Logistics technology made it easier and more affordable to pick, pack, and ship smaller quantities. So suddenly it was affordable to ship one, when in the past it had not been. ERP technology, enterprise resource planning, and MRP technology, manufacturing resource planning, emerged during those times. And as we systematized our operations, both in terms of automation, but also in terms of computer technology, it became much easier to see the true costs of an organization and where an organization could flex and bend. And then transportation technology itself, FedEx, UPS, all of them made it easier and more affordable to ship those smaller packages. That is a huge disruption that, well, basically what it did was it made it possible for manufacturers to go direct. So that was the second big disruption. In the late 90s, we experienced the third disruption, and that's the internet and smartphone disruption. You can't really just say and smartphone disruption continued into the early 2000s. So phones started the process of putting a computer in somebody's hand, which was fully realized by 2006 when Apple's, was it 2006? I'm pretty sure 2006 was the first smartphone. It just seems too recent, but I think that's when it was. So suddenly there's a computer in everybody's hand. The internet removes the retail barrier to entry. So suddenly you don't have to be able to afford a piece of real estate and a lease and a retail build out and a safe in order to have a retail presence and an insurance policy that's big enough to cover a store and even security systems. Suddenly anyone can be in retail if they have a website. This disruption also introduced the concept of endless choice. Consumers have now become convinced they can have anything they want from anywhere. Now, the COVID crisis is making us realize I can't just have it in 2 days. And sometimes I have to go without one thing and replace it with another thing. But this idea of endless choice is pretty well ingrained in the global consumer consciousness. This disruption also changed the minimum standard necessary to compete. And what I mean by that is consumers started having much bigger expectations in terms of whether they could see prices. Could they look up anything they wanted? Could they read about it without talking to a salesperson? Could they put it in a shopping cart, put a credit card number in, and have it arrive at their house? So it totally changed the minimum standard necessary to compete. And then it further commoditized jewelry. So now we didn't just have commoditization based on this sea of sameness that was coming out of a lot of the manufacturing, but it was also commoditization based on being able to compare prices and being able to pull up a spread, like in diamonds, you can pull up a spreadsheet and see everybody's prices compared. So that was the further commoditization of jewelry. Then, so impacts of the third disruption, we get a lot more noise. Now consumers have to cut through a lot more noise to buy anything. It let consumer tastes out of the bag. Suddenly, style wasn't dictated by one style doyen or house. People started being able to buy what they wanted and putting it together the way they wanted, and that has really globalized style. It also allowed for, now European style has always heavily influenced American style, but suddenly all of our styles were being influenced by Korean style and Indian style. And so we've got this globalization of style that really was pushed in this third disruption. Our consumer expectations changed, and retail was also globalized. Suddenly, if you really wanted something from a Northern European designer, you could access it. You may not be able to figure out how to navigate all of the customs to import that piece of jewelry, but you could find it. And if everybody worked together, you could get it. This disruption also revealed significant technology deficiencies in the jewelry industry. And this is a worldwide problem, not just an American problem. So now we have a fourth disruption. The fourth disruption was the 2007 to 2010 global recession. That really, it was a financial recession, it was a recession as is the COVID-19 likely to lead to a recession, but it was driven by financial parameters. But the things that it did was it really elevated quality of life concerns. It highlighted responsible consumption. People started thinking, well, did I have to own all this stuff that has now caused me to be in so much debt that I can't survive this recession? So people started really thinking about what they owned in a more broad way than had been happening before. And then it also altered the luxury landscape, because leading up to the 2007-8 recession, depending on where it hit you, one of the things that was happening was anybody could buy any luxury product, and people were literally spending the equity in their houses on their tennis shoes and boats. And suddenly people had to rethink their thought process around luxury, and luxury sellers themselves had to rethink what they had done to get to the point where they were actually universally available, as if they were big department stores serving the middle market. So the 2007 to 2010 disruption just really reinforced a lot of the trends we had already been seeing, both the problems and the opportunities. And now we have our fifth disruption, which is COVID-19. This is already changing the way we work. It's already putting a huge spotlight on supply chain interdependence. So those of us who've been talking about manufacturing diversification for a long time, we've worried about the lack of diversification in the manufacturing sector for the jewelry and apparel industries. But this COVID-19 really makes everybody pay attention. It's not just some worrying about interdependence. It's everybody living through the problems of not being able to get things through their supply chains. It's therefore producing incredible challenges to just-in-time production, which every industry is heavily reliant on. It's introducing this new question, which is what I call, when you have retail and you add distancing, what do you have? There's going to be a significant loss of players across the jewelry industry, and it's highlighting systems and infrastructure disruptions. So this is our fifth disruption. So we have all of these disruptions that have played out and sort of gotten us to the point that we're at now. So there are also a couple of hidden trends that nobody's really paying attention to, and they're pre-existing COVID-19. One is that we have micro producers all over the world that have become now thousands of independent online retailers. And there's, in addition to the micro producers that are selling their own work directly, we also have online retailers who are just aggregating other people's product and selling. And this can be anything from one person working out of a back room in their house to little small companies that are starting to grow through all the sales they're doing. And we're also seeing a growing segment of appointment only and non-stocking jewelry sellers. So it's changing the model at the consumer end across the board. And I don't think these trends are things that people have been paying as much attention to, but they're very important. Many of these micro producers and appointment only jewelry sellers are continuing to function as they have in the past, even as other retailers have to close their doors and don't know how to do sales. So how do we respond to all this? Today, we're just going to talk in big themes. Like I said, it's changing daily. I can't study it fast enough to really wrap my arms around it. I'm not sure anyone can. So we're going to talk about the big themes, and then we're just going to keep monitoring. So just like you need a historical context to understand and envision future actions, you also need business context to understand and envision your future activities. It's important to reflect on the fact that all these changes that I just sort of brushed past aren't just affecting our business functions and tasks and prospects. They have affected and will continue to affect our business models. I put a basic definition of business model here because I've noticed that a lot of times people use the term business model, but they use it in a lot of different ways. So the definition of business model is the design. You design your business. So it's the design for the operation of a business that includes identifying your revenue sources, your customer base, your products, and the details of your financing. And if you think about the changes we're going through now, it's going to affect revenue sources, customer base, products, and the details of your financing. Now, when business models change, they drive dramatic shifts in where the money goes and does not go in a supply chain. Business models have been changing throughout all the five disruptions, and COVID-19 is very likely to have the biggest impact on the jewelry industry's business models, or at least the fastest, because we've all been trending in this direction anyway, but now, boom, it's going to change faster. And that's going to have significant impact on the manufacturing and supply chain alignments and all of our supply chain activities. So we're going to start looking at our supply chain and manufacturing opportunities going forward. And we're going to take into account the trend lines that are already in play, the way COVID-19 is likely to affect the business models, the way that the previous trend lines combined with COVID-19 are likely to affect consumer behavior and demand, the impact those changes are likely to have on the supply chain, and the impact those changes are likely to have on manufacturing, not only location. When I talk about globalization, people instantly think I just mean where you manufacture. That's not all manufacturing globalization is about. It's also about our manufacturing focus. So those are the things we're going to talk about from here through the rest of the session. And to begin that discussion, I'd like to start by looking at metal market implications. So to do that, I'll be interviewing an expert in this area, Filippo Finocchi. Filippo Finocchi is the business development manager for Legor Group in Italy, where he's in charge of all precious metal market activity, including acquisition, trading, financial analysis. Prior to Legor, he was the head of finance for Italpreziosi, which is a global leader in precious metals refining and trading. Filippo is also a serial entrepreneur, so he's been engaged past and present in projects as diverse as blockchain technology for mining applications and also communications and systems development. He has master's degrees in finance and economics, but he has the unique skill set of being capable of making metal market and finance discussions very simple and clear. He's also my colleague and friend, and I'm really pleased he's joining me. So Filippo, if you will pop on your camera and microphone, I will switch us to you. Hi.
Hi, everybody.
How's evening in Italy?
Yeah, I can say that is the first day of good weather after 3 days raining. So very happy, very happy. Unfortunately, the situation is very tough for 2 months, but we see the light at the end of the tunnel. So they announced that the 4th of May will be the last day of quarantine. So we are very excited about the chance to come out and come back to work, the normal work. And anyway, I agree with you that we need not the normal condition because the situation won't pass, but will evolve. Absolutely, I totally agree. Will be totally different in terms of logistics, and it will be different in terms of trips, business trips. We need to face months until the vaccine that will be totally different compared to the past. Absolutely. So I take the occasion to go on with your speech, and you say that have been many disruptions, okay, that are connected to this situation. One of these is an opportunity because we need to take chance about what is a lack in our activities before the virus. One of these usually is the finance, is the hedging. Usually in the precious metal market, because I saw many companies that lost a lot of money in not hedging the positions on the market. So what I would like to do today is to give some ideas about the precious metals, what's happened, what will happen with us, a lot of forecast in what we think that will happen in the near future about precious metals. Okay, so we saw the terrible week that we had in March. Okay, the second week of March with gold, silver, platinum, palladium that lost a lot of ground, maybe the 35% on a weekly basis, and these decreases didn't affect in the same way all metals. Why? Because mainly they hit the industrial metals such as silver, such as platinum, palladium, and rhodium. Gold has been different because after the first shock in the first week, mainly caused by the taking profits moves and the looking for liquidity sell-off, gold had the strength to rebound again, touching the 8 years record high at $1,750 per ounce last week. So many investors, why this happened? Because many investors moved back to gold, looking for a safe haven, concerned about the consistency of the economic recovery and the high level of debt that can be reached in the next future. So now there are a lot of concerns over the expected inflation in the next 18 months, as trillions of dollars of monetary and fiscal stimulus launched by the authorities, by all the central banks worldwide, are likely to put incredible pressure on the fiat currencies. For these reasons, we could expect to see prices remain stable above 1,700 over the year. But some analysts, such as the Bank of America or Saxo Bank analysts, are forecasting that gold prices can rally more than 80% in the next 2 years, touching the $3,000 or $4,000 per ounces within the end of the 2020. So from a technical point of view now, prices are in a triangle between 1,650 and 1,750. So we need to see the breach of these levels, because that the breach, for example, on the upside, will represent a positive signal to the achievement of the all-time high that we saw in 2011. For what concerns silver, we have a good day today, because we have the fresh news coming from the Silver Institute that published the new silver survey today, in which we can see a substantial stability between supply and demand in 19 compared to the previous year, obviously, but marking a big increase in investment. So we saw a lot of investment in silver that broke prices, you saw last year, from 15 up to 18 in 2019. Now the situation is totally changed because of the COVID. So in 2020, they expect to show a decrease in supply, mainly from mines, because the disruption in mining production. And they are expecting the 4% minus in production, in total supply. That could be balanced by a lower demand of about 3%, mainly driven by industrial jewelry and silverware demand that are forecasted to decrease of 7%, 10%, and 9%. But as well as the last year, forecasts are showing that there will be a huge increase in ATP investments. So silver demand will be boosted by the silver ETPs, okay, and they're expecting the price can reach the $19 per ounce at the end of this year. Situation is really dramatic in terms of reliability of these forecasts, as the virus destroy everything that analysts can forecast. So, in particular, silver as an industrial metal has been deeply affected because we need to see silver as we can say a dual metal, because it's an investment, but it's also industrial. It's not good as gold as investment. It's not good as other metals as industrial. So it's deeply affected by industrial the depression we can see in these 2 months. And in my opinion, not expected prices to move a lot during this year, remaining in the trading range between $14 and $17 per ounce. This is my opinion. In the long run, we see the prices that can run again. Some analysts say $50 per ounce, because we expect that more silver will be used in automotive market, because of new technology will bring new use of electronic circuits, motherboards in the cars itself. So we expect more use of silver in the automotive market.
Will that choke off supply for silver for jewelry producers who are using silver, or is there enough supply but it'll just raise prices?
I think that the shock won't be. I think that will be gradual, okay, step by step increase. I don't see shock on silver anyway. Honestly, I see shock, for example, on rhodium and palladium, because I think that prices in this moment are not reflecting the real normal situation on these markets. Okay, for example, we start to think about platinum. Okay, platinum demand now is constrained due to the coronavirus. Okay, but supply as well at the same level. We have a lack of production, because you saw that South Africa, that is one of the main producers, it is accounted for the 70% of the production of platinum worldwide, is in shutdown. So they only produced the 50%, and they started just only 1 week ago. So they remain steady for 3 weeks, 1 month of production. It is incredible, no? So I think that platinum has very good chances to rise in the future, as the new restrictions on the emissions that have to be taken next year, and the possibility of its substitution for palladium can really boost the demand on platinum. From a technical point of view, at the contrary, in the short term, it's very important to see the breach of 780 dollar per ounce, obviously, because it's a very important resistance to the upside. A breach of this level can be very positive to enter in the platinum market. For what concerns palladium, situation is totally different, because palladium and rhodium, their consumption is directly connected to the catalyst market, and consequently to the auto vehicles production. That has been one of the most affected market by the COVID-19 shutdown. So for this reason, we saw last month and last week an impressive fall in the price. Okay, but as the market is concerned about the consistency of the recovery of this sector, in terms of supply and demand, we have a decrease in demand by the cars producers, but at the same time, South Africa is running at 50%, as I told you. So we can see that has been balanced, and we have to consider also that major refineries that are refining and so they're producing the finished palladium in the market, or rhodium itself, are not working at full capacity, or sometimes are closed in this moment. So we need to think about that. They have to produce, they have to refine, and they have to sell. So it's a lot of time that can reduce the supply on the market. So at this moment, prices are reflecting the situation, this current situation. But it will be important to assist to the reopening after the worldwide shutdown to see the consistency of the demand, and have the confirmation of the positive trend that we saw before the virus. My expectations in the long run are very positive on palladium and rhodium, and I see prices that can go above 3,000 for palladium, and for rhodium I think that can reach 20,000. Are too much, I am sure, but I think that can go, that can be reached, because there are no substitution for rhodium. Right. So if you need to produce cars with the new restrictions, you have to buy rhodium. The production of rhodium is very short, is very small in the worldwide. Refineries are very few refineries, and the time to refine the rhodium is not gold. You cannot refine in one day. So all the refineries worldwide are full in capacity in terms of rhodium. Okay, when they will reopen. So I think that prices there will be a shock on prices on rhodium when they will reopen. That's my opinion.
So if I'm understanding you right, gold's going up right now because it's being used as a financial instrument. Everything else is getting falsely depressed because of all of the drop in demand. But then they're going to come back together, and then it sounds like they're going to go back to their old trend.
Yeah, it could be. But for example, in gold is a money, no? So as you know, the first choice for investors when there is a crisis is US dollars. It is the safe haven. Okay, there's no euro, there's no investments, there's no bonds, maybe the treasuries, but the first purchase that you do in terms of crisis, when there is a crisis, is US dollars, because you are looking for liquidity. The second step is the safe haven. So the safe haven is the treasury, okay, and gold. So in this moment, investors are looking for gold, are looking for treasuries, are looking for US dollars. So in my opinion, gold shined because of these reasons, okay? But now there is a very important resistance, okay, very important resistance. It can be really interesting, because if you need to sell, this is the best moment, okay? This is the best moment. If you need to buy, probably you have to wait just a little bit consolidation, okay? I don't want to buy now, but if you have to, maybe you can see lower prices, but very lower prices. But in my opinion, we can reach the all-time high, because it's very strong now. All the market is pushing on gold. There are no other instruments in this moment. So if the price will breach the resistance, 1,750, I think that we can go up to the all-time high.
Okay. All right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the slides, but I know there's going to be a bunch of questions for you, Filippo. So do you mind hanging out, and then we'll do Q&A together at the end and talk metals and markets then?
Yeah, I saw, just a second. I saw a question.
Yep.
Yeah, so okay. It's a very interesting question, because I already touched this in another presentation, because the laboratory-based gold production is very expensive. They were expecting a price of 5,000, 6,000 per ounces cost for production. So I don't think they are changing a lot. So I don't think until up to that level, we see a disruption in prices because of this. Instead, we can have a disruption in terms of lack of production of gold. That's for sure, because if the demand will be compensated by the lack of supply, will be compensated by the lack of demand, we we probably can see a deficit on the market, okay, and the price goes up again, because the central banks are buying a lot. When I was in the last experience, working experience, we were selling a lot of bars to the banks, and all the central banks, all the corporate banks were purchasing gold. So we saw an increase in 60%, 70% of in percentage of purchases from central banks in 2017, 2018.
Okay, cool. All right, so now I'm going to jump back into the slides. Thanks, Filippo. We'll come back to you again for more questions in a little bit. Get your questions together, folks. Go ahead and drop them into the chat box, and we'll be watching for those later. Okay, so as I said a few minutes ago, the big movement of the first disruption was to do labor arbitrage. But before COVID-19, well before COVID-19, we were already starting to swing back in the other direction. In January 2019, there was a report by McKinsey & Company, and it was actually called Globalization in Transition, the Future of Trade and Value Chains. And they identified a few major trends that I don't think people have been paying attention to. The first was that this idea of trade intensity, which is the output of share of products that are traded, that's been declining in almost every single value chain. So from consumer goods to manufactured goods to medical, it has been actually declining. And flows of service and data are now playing a bigger share in the global trading money than flows of goods. Now, that's not necessarily because there's less money flowing, or there's less goods flowing from low labor cost countries to high labor cost countries. It's because low labor cost countries are starting to consume more of their own goods. But this has a huge impact on globalization. So only about 18% of global trade was driven by low labor cost arbitrage before COVID-19. And that's because China and other emerging economies are consuming more of what they produce. And as those domestic supply chains grow in those countries and they want to consume more of what they produce, they're influencing style and design and material choice as well. New technologies have been coming on board as part of this, and trade is becoming more and more concentrated in regions. So I just want everybody to be aware that low labor or labor cost arbitrage was declining already before COVID-19. That is a trend that is likely to be accelerated now. And it's also highlighting some of the weaknesses that we have when we concentrate so much of our production and supply chain in places very far away from our customers. So one of the responsibilities that any company has is to have a playbook for supply disruptions in its network. It's the whole thought process around supply chain management. And when we diversify our sources of supplies, then when one source is impacted, you can turn to others. But jewelry supply chains, which also includes both fine jewelry and fashion and bridge jewelry, have not been constructed to be resilient, not for the most part. They are among the simplest and least transparent supply chains in the world. The jewelry manufacturers that excel in this next era of business will be the ones that focus on fixing these deficiencies. So pre-COVID-19, trade liberalization was already in reverse, and tax codes were already changing because of countries trying to get a better handle on digital trade of goods. And then COVID-19 has expanded those risks. There's a whole basket of issues going on here. So new automation technologies and changing factor costs and the increasing importance of speed to market. All of those things have been driving localization in the goods producing value chains. So as a result, it may make sense. And again, this was a pre-COVID-19 thing. It was starting to look like it made more sense to place some production in or near key consumer markets around the world. Before investing in distance manufacturing, companies really need to consider the full risk-adjusted end-to-end landed costs of location decisions. And for companies who are thinking right now about their production post-COVID-19, that's going to be even more important. Because there's a real, because this is something that we already have to think about as we see that supply chains can be disrupted. Now, it's not just about the distance between our supply chains or the difficulty of moving things in COVID-19 or the tariffs that came up before COVID-19 that were starting to interfere with trade. Those tariffs are more about another issue, which is that there's a real chance that decades of trade liberalization are about to be reversed using both tariff and non-tariff barriers. So already in play, and now COVID-19 has added this infection and quarantine barrier type, something that's likely to be going on for the next 18 to 24 months. As Filippo said just a moment ago, until there's a vaccine and some safer way of achieving herd immunity, there's going to be a lot of staying inside, people afraid to go outside, and also rolling returns to quarantine, like we're seeing in Asia right now. So we've got this trade liberalization problem already, or I don't know if it's a problem or not a problem, that's sort of your political perspective, but the trade liberalization being reversed, and now we've added infection and quarantine to the mix. So some obvious things like placing production near or in consumer markets need to be considered, but then that brings design implications. So if you're producing in China, but you're designing for the European market or the US market, then your European and US design preferences work. But right now we're seeing something really interesting. So we're trying to sell precious metals and base metals into the Chinese production market, and Chinese producers are back up and running, but they're not producing for the European and US markets. They're producing for the local Chinese markets. That's who's buying right now. Chinese consumers do have some crossover style preferences with US and European design thought, but there are also some major differences. So from a global production standpoint, you have to be thinking, well, if you're producing in China and it's not for the, can you actually produce for the Chinese consumption? Not only can your designs hold up, but do your business models and contracts even support leaving your production there for sale? Or is the only way you can monetize it to bring it back home again? Most manufacturers won't be able to capitalize on Chinese consumption, only on Chinese production. So building agile operations can help firms prepare for all kinds of uncertainties, and it can take a lot of forms. So, are you diversifying your supply chain so you know where to get certain products from? Are you achieving flexibility in your production cycles? Do you have not just redundancy and flexibility, but can you help shape consumer demand? Because in fashion and in consumer goods, those manufacturing sectors work very hard to shape consumer demand and to be able to quickly change things out to take advantage of consumer demand. So if a particular buckle or feature on a product is not available for a moment, they can quickly swap in a different element and still sell the product from another place in their supply chain. The jewelry industry, fashion and fine, isn't that flexible in its design thought process at this time. So these are areas where we need to increase our flexibility and our agility in design, in our technology use, in the diversification of our supply chains, if we are going to continue to manufacture in as global a manner as we are. When we talk about being more proximate to customers and faster speed to market, we're also talking about expert use of data, using data to understand emerging demand and using that insight to shape that demand and respond to that demand, or create new demand that people haven't recognized may be desirable, but you're responding to things you see in the data, and you can show someone something and they say, wow, I didn't know I needed that, but I clearly need that. We use data for that, but in the jewelry industry, we are not collecting sufficient real-time granular sales and consumer behavior data because there's this complete breakdown in the supply chain between retail activity and insights and manufacturer visibility. Those insights are very limited. Now, department stores and some chain retailers have been collecting and sharing some data, but in fine jewelry, those insights are rarely collected, and even then they're poorly collected. So for manufacturing diversification and supply chain stability, we have to look across the entire supply chain, from where things are, where the raw materials are sourced to where they're made, and then all the way through the supply chain to where they're sold. And what we're seeing is the world can break down, and regional production to sales is a safer prospect for when supply chains break down. And if you want to be able to still manufacture in a very global way, and of course our raw materials in this industry come from all over the world, so it's not like we can stop sourcing from all of these other places in the world, nor would we want to. But increasing transparency and using technology to smooth out some of those supply chain elements is going to be really important. So I think we're going to see a combination of localization of manufacturing, but also increasing transparency through technology to have better relationships and management across all of our supply chains. Some combination of those two things has to be in play if we're going to continue to be economically viable. A lot of people ask at this point, well, what about additive manufacturing? Is it going to solve all of our problems? Most experts believe that AM will not replace mass production over the next decade. It doesn't have the speed yet. The cost and quality are still limited. We're still struggling with surface quality in some of the faster AM equipment that's being developed now, but it is gaining traction for prototypes, and it can be used for short runs very effectively. And smart manufacturers are going to start looking at ways to spur trade with AM, even before it overcomes these limitations, mostly by using it to enable mass customization. So overall, nobody thinks AM is likely to amount to more than a few percentage points across overall trade in manufactured goods before 2030. But if you think about how fast 2020 got here, I mean, I feel like it was just 2002, and here it is 2020. Now is the time to start preparing for AM in the future. The big AM manufacturers are all saying, yeah, we wish we were really ready right now with COVID-19 happening, but the technology is just still not quite there yet for high-speed additive manufacturing in precious metals and base metals. On that point, next Thursday, we will be discussing additive manufacturing more deeply in this webinar, same time, 1 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. HP has committed to joining us. I'm hoping to get some commitments in the next day or so from a couple of other producers. So stay tuned on the MJSA website for more information on that webinar. Okay, technology. This is another big area that's going to affect global production and supply. So pre-COVID-19, we have very poor utilization of existing technology. And by existing technology, I mean everything from the manufacturing technology to, we've kind of maximized what you can do with, lost wax casting, right? We're using CAD and CAM much more effectively now, but we don't use our logistics technology as well. We don't use our ERP technology as well as we could, and we have not created integration points across the supply chain for our technology to speak to each other. So we've just got poor utilization and poor integration. Post-COVID-19, on the supply side, we are going to have to see much more intensive use of technology and much greater integration across the supply chain, both upstream and downstream. So we're going to need track and trace technology going all the way back to raw material sourcing. We're going to need to carry it all the way through to manufacturing. We're going to need to be able to see those transactions all the way through to retail. On the retail side, there's going to have to be a dramatic push to omni-channel with integration points along the supply chain as well. So connecting manufacturers to retailers, at least at the point of data share, is going to become increasingly important. We can't get more agile in our design and shaping consumer demand processes until we have more visibility to the retail-facing data. So those are some things that are happening in technology, in production control, data marketing, and selling. In logistics, I don't have a pre-COVID-19 or a post-COVID-19 piece to this slide. What it is all the technology exists already to decrease the distance between production and consumers. And your competitiveness is going to hinge on your use of those technologies. So better utilization of technology in inventory management, forecasting, mass personalization and customization, and delivery systems. So technology in operations as well as in behavioral data analysis. That's very important for logistics. And I can answer questions about that as you have more specific questions when we get to Q&A, but I just see logistics is kind of like this redheaded stepchild in the world of business management. It's just not sexy enough for most people. So I go to these operations forums and we talk about, picking, packing, and shipping, and how to, expand the cube in your warehouse, and how to improve your delivery of boxes between your manufacturing point and your retail point and everywhere in between. And the marketing people are kind of like, they hate this part of business because it's not sexy. But what's really sexy about logistics is when you nail it, you make more money, you do a better job. And these logistics technologies are available for tiny producers. So if you're a small producer, don't brush off this slide thinking that's not for me. Everyone needs to be thinking about how they can integrate to other points in their supply chain and deliver things more effectively to consumers. Because running out to the curb to deliver a box is just not going to be our future, but getting more boxes in the hands of people at home, because now they're going to want that more than they ever did before, that is part of your future. Responsibility and transparency are a huge emerging part of this globalization thought process. So with every image of a major city without smog, with every picture of a coyote running down Michigan Avenue in Chicago, with every report about the Earth's vibrations being stilled, there have been new converts and increased commitment to sustainability. It was already happening. We were already seeing an accelerated consumer interest in social justice and economic justice and in the environment. People who were refusing to talk about the environment 5 years ago are talking about it now. We see a lot of news about how people are still resisting and reducing regulations in areas of economic protection. And that seems to be big in the news, but at the individual human level, there is much more commitment to these topics than there ever was before. The Kimberley process and RJC have already, before COVID-19, raised the bar for social and environmental responsibility. Neither one of them get us where we need to go, but they're speaking to the mainstream jewelry industry, and that's powerful. That tells us where things are going. And tax codes and tariffs. This is another thing. Governments want more transparency, and it's not a qualitative necessarily. In some governments it is, but it's not necessarily coming from this qualitative, we want to know how people are living and how the earth is being traded. They want taxes. They want to be able to raise money on trade. And so increased transparency is necessary for those regulatory initiatives. But all of these things work toward this transparent supply chain thought process, which the jewelry industry isn't all that big on. We've not been a very transparent industry all these years. So we're going to see accelerated search for solutions to blockchain. We are going to see, in COVID-19, and my fear is that we have not even anticipated how this is going to hit us, but we're going to see increased awareness of human suffering. It's hitting us at home. It hit us in Italy. It's hitting us in all, countries all around the world after, like at first everybody thought, oh, this is just a China thing. Then it was like, oh, poor Italy, what a mess. And now it's like, oh, the whole world. And we have not seen what's going to happen in the Southern Hemisphere. And that worries me a lot, because there we have a lot of health systems that are not prepared to deal with this. And that increased awareness of human suffering is going to drive responsibility initiatives. So your ability to report provenance and working conditions is going to become extremely important as part of your global supply chain responsibility. Now, design and style, I'm just going to talk about this for a minute. I think it's really important, but it's not so much the topic of today. Consumers are bored. There's too much jewelry that looks exactly the same. And then even before COVID-19, more regional consumption made design more challenging, because the tastes in Denmark are very different from the tastes in Texas, which are different again from the tastes in Seoul. So regional consumption drives a lot of design thought process. And now we've already had consumers asking for more and more personalization. Short term, for COVID-19, styles will change. Major design houses have already said, forget it. Everything we designed for the fall collections 2020, out the window. We're scrapping it. We're starting over. Because when a crisis this big happens, styles change, material choices change, the whole feeling of the world has changed, and that changes the way we adorn ourselves. We did a webinar last week. You can find it in the replays on the MJSA website, where I talked to 3 jewelry historians about how design changed in World War I and the Great Depression and World War II. That was interesting. Designing for the global consumer. So if we localize manufacturing more as a result of this, will we more globalize sales? Because on the other end, we've got our logistics and our web technology driving reach of consumers. Possibly, but then you're designing for a more global consumer. For sure, so that's a big question mark for me, but I think it's something you should ponder. So for sure, styles will change. For sure, there's going to be more customization and personalization. And here's another interesting one. As everybody starts working on video, there's a shift to earrings and necklaces. Suddenly we can see each other like really close up, face to face on these monitors, and we can see ourselves. Women tend to wear rings and bracelets because we can see them. That's what we see when we're out in the world. Now we've noticed that we're not wearing earrings and we're not wearing necklaces. I've noticed more of my male friends wearing earrings. We could actually see some category changes in jewelry as a result of COVID-19. Now, these next 4 slides aren't so much about globalization as they are about your distribution networks. And of course, we don't have to worry about globalization and supply chains if we don't have sales activity, right? So in that regard, it's really relevant. So one thing for sure, it is time to get really transparent and practical about how we all work together. Because the supply chain from beginning to end holds a certain amount of money, and that money has to pay everybody in the supply chain. It's already unequitably distributed within the supply chain. If you look at where the money lands for our source producers in gemstones and minerals, and there are some significant risks to the supply chain now at the other end in retail, because pre-COVID-19, they were poorly capitalized. They already presented a lot of credit risk. There's poor utilization of technology at the retail sector, and they're very commoditized. So now manufacturers are start thinking, what's our next move? How do we help retail? Do we rack job retail? Rack jobbing is just where you have a certain amount of cases and you stock it and manage it and make sure it's selling. I mean, I don't know if that's practical for jewelry or not, but the big apparel designers are already talking about rack jobbing retail at the clothing point. So I think it's worthy for us to talk about it jewelry. Do we go to drop shipping and collaboration strategies? We're already seeing some of that in jewelry. Gabriel's popping iframes into websites at retailers and saying, we'll take the order, we will ship it in Gabriel packaging. So they're grabbing some mind share there, and then they're going to send that money to the retailer, their cut. Are those strategies viable, or some version of those strategies viable? Or are manufacturers going to go direct to consumer? Those are all things that we need to be thinking about as part of our overall strategy. I'd like to share one thought with you about services, because I think that's really interesting. In global supply chains, services are much harder to track and measure. We can track products, but it's hard to attach financial levels to services. But using some alternative measures, McKinsey & Company has reported already last year that services already constitute more value in global trade than goods. And this diagram here illustrates that for you. In addition, all global value chains are becoming more knowledge intensive. So now we're back to our use of data and how we use data to integrate our supply chains and inform every element of the supply chain. And low skill labor, as we saw, is becoming less important as a factor of production. Now, I think this is interesting because it opens up the possibility of new value streams in our industries. How? I have no idea. It's just an interesting transition. So I think there's something there. I think it's something we need to look at. It's possible that innovative utilization of services will differentiate or could differentiate some of our jewelry businesses. So, we've already seen some experimental use of services across jewelry supply chains. A lot of that was related to configuration of jewelry. Most people aren't monetizing the configuration itself, just the end product. We're seeing more people trying to do innovative work with additive manufacturing on very small production machines. So there's some experimental use of it. Major retailers are moving into services to offset the decline in foot traffic. Nordstrom was experimenting before all this happened with having little stores that carried no inventory, but a customer worked with a personal shopper. The personal shopper brought in a wardrobe's worth of clothing. The customer goes into this little outlet space that's not a regular store and just experiences their own personal shopping. So there's been some experimentation with it, and I think it's worthwhile for us to think about how this could evolve for us as an industry. Is there anything there for us? So going forward, it's important to be realistic. We have to face up to the understanding that there's likely to be a much deeper recession coming. I think it's magical thinking to anticipate anything other than a long drawn out recovery, especially for companies with working capital or liquidity shortages. And we've got a lot of companies in the industry veering toward bankruptcy. So I think we need to be realistic. I think there need to be clear, unflinching conversations with your suppliers at all points in the supply chain. I strongly recommend that every manufacturing company map your supply chains. Make sure you can identify where every piece of everything is coming from in your supply chains. You need to do it now because we've got supply chain disruption, and that's likely to be a rolling disruption over the next 18 months. And I believe you're going to have those maps in place when we get to starting with data integration and producing that transparent information about our supply chains that is coming. You may not like it, but it's coming, and you're not going to be able to play if you don't have that kind of transparency. So map your supply chains now. That means mapping your technology environment. Understand what technology and computing you have right now and what pieces might be missing that will allow you to integrate your supply chain informationally. You need clear, unflinching conversations with your buyers. Everybody's reluctant to talk about this, but the simplest conversation is, I don't have any money right now. Oh, I don't have any money right now. Okay, how do we work this out? That conversation will get you a lot further than avoiding the conversation will. It's important to forecast your business potential based on your current realities, so you can see what the problems with that are going to be, so you can start innovating your business model and your business skills so that you can compete in whatever this new business environment looks like next. Jewelry has always sold. It's going to continue to sell. None of the crises of the last century stopped jewelry from selling, but it will change. So people that were big players before the last century's crises, some of them disappeared. Some of them changed and became stronger. You need to be one of the businesses that changes and becomes stronger. And these are all the thought processes that you need to be engaging in order to figure out how to do that. So now I'm going to switch back to video and entertain any questions that you have. And I'll skim back. And Filippo, if you want to come back on with me, I'm guessing there's going to be some more metal markets questions. Let's see, you answered Laura's. Joanna Ports asked, what are some new technologies coming out of manufacturing in the East, and how do you research that? I'm not familiar with any new production technologies coming out of the East. And we talked briefly about lab-grown gold. I think we've got a long ramp up till there's anything realistic in lab-grown gold. The next big production technology on the horizon is going to be additive manufacturing. So and there's two competing technologies for high-speed additive manufacturing. Both of them are really close, but not quite there. Otherwise, the rest of the technologies that you need to be using are data and logistics and operations management technologies to become more efficient. Let me know if I didn't answer that for you well enough, Joanna. Let's see, Christian is asking, can I expand on technology transparency for the supply chain? So if you have an efficient manufacturing and ERP system set up where you can see the conversion of your raw materials into finished goods, and you can track them by lots and batches, then you can connect to the suppliers of your raw materials and goods, and you can track them by lots and batches. And that requires field technology, perhaps like blockchain. And then we can watch that product move all the way through the system, all the way to your next distribution point or your retailer and on to the consumer. That's what I'm talking about in terms of transparency in this supply chain. And it's coming because of increased demands by governments all over the world for visibility to these transactions. And it's coming from increased consumer pressure to make sure that we're making responsible choices in how we buy and from whom we buy. Laura is saying, in IT, we saw similar trends in technology and manufacturing, and one of the results was acquisitions of smaller companies by bigger companies, and therefore fewer market choices for clients. Do I think this will happen in jewelry as well? Interestingly, I don't. Because at the same time that we saw that happening in the IT world, in jewelry, what we've seen is this explode. Well, there've always been a lot of jewelry designers, a lot of people that would go learn to be metalsmiths and gemologists, and then they would, make or design jewelry, and then they would always have some little private clienteles. At the same time, they went and worked for a retail store or for a design house. And those designers are figuring out how to get to their consumers using this explosion in internet technology. So I think we're going to see both. I think we will see consolidation in the jewelry industry, but I also think our designer community is going to continue to find its customer. And that will be good for customers because they're going to see choice, and it will be good for manufacturers because it's going to pressure you to give more serious thought to design. Let's see. Looking for more questions here. How does one identify reliable manufacturers in the US and Europe? Filippo, you might have some thoughts on this in terms of, ethical, responsible, reliable metals sources. For me, I always ask for, I like to go visit a supplier. To me, visiting a supplier tells you more than just about anything else. But reliability, I often ask to talk to another customer. That's a very fair thing to ask. They may have to say, let me talk to a couple of people and find out who will talk to you. Give them time to do that. But I like to hear how other customers feel about their manufacturers or their suppliers. In the jewelry industry, there's a lot of really small private providers, so it can be a little harder. If you've got a big possible provider that you're going to work with, I also like to see how they treat their employees. That will tell you how reliable they are, because it will tell you if they have the kind of turnover that gets in the way of quality. So you can go to things like Glassdoor and see what their employees say about them. Do you have any thoughts on that for reliable providers of metals, Filippo? Oh, I think your microphone might be off.
Okay.
There you go.
And so I saw the question about the gold production in lab. Okay. For what concerns the lab production against the mining, I don't think there is an accountable mining production produced in lab, because as I told you, production in lab maybe has been proven one time, tried one time, and the cost was 5,000, 6,000. The additional way to obtain gold in the lab is via nuclear reaction. So I don't think the price will be so cheaper to be substituted to the mining production. So I don't think this. I think that mining production is affected, as Andrea told you earlier, about the problems in logistics. We saw a lot of disruption in the last 2 months, in particular in the Africa continent, because they hadn't the chance to move gold, mine gold. So I think that what has been affected in this moment by COVID-19 has been the logistic transportation worldwide of gold. So the mining production will be affected by the problem to move that gold away from Africa. So that has been reflected in prices at the beginning of April, with 30%, 40% of discount in Accra. So we saw a very huge decrease in prices, in premiums, so in discount on the local communities, that they hadn't the chance to move material from the mines to the refineries. So that has been a big disruption in production. And that's all. I don't think that the gold producing lab will have some future, maybe in the next 2 years.
You think it's that soon? No, I was just going to ask, how long do you think it is before lab produced gold is even a viable thought process?
Yeah.
You think in 2 years we could see some advances?
I don't know. I don't know, because there are no big laboratories that are releasing news about this. We have you can find some news on Google, Scientist American, that explain that they tried in lab to produce it, but not in industrial way, because prices are not allowing to produce in industrial way, because, as I told you, it's a nuclear reaction to produce it. So I don't think so. I don't think they are investing in this.
Okay. Christian's asking about robotics usage in jewelry production. It's interesting. To do robotics well, you have to have incredibly tight tolerances on shapes and sizes. So you have to have calibrated stones if you're going to use robotics. You have to have also, now you guys know with additive manufacturing, well, we're seeing some shrink in things like metal jet as well. We didn't think we'd see much shrink, but there's actually shrink. Lost wax casting does not produce an incredibly precise part. There can be variance from part to part that's maybe not very visible to the eye, but it is extremely visible to the arm and eye of a robot. So as a result, because we don't have super precise products in most jewelry production, other than things like stamping. In stamping, in MIM, we can get pretty precise. But for most fine jewelry production, the precision's not there, so the use of robotics has not been widely used. It's used in limited applications, and there's lots of experimentation with it, but I haven't seen any dramatic adoption of robotics for jewelry. If anyone's seen anything different on this, just pop in there with your comment. There are so many jewelry manufacturing plants tucked in so many corners all over the world that there is no possible way of knowing what's happening in all of them, or even just in that range between Wuhan and Shenzhen in China. You can't get into all of them. Any other questions from this group? It looks like maybe a little bit. I'm just holding on for a second to see if you've got any more questions or comments. Filippo, anything you want to leave with this group as a parting thought on how to view the metal markets relative to COVID-19?
I have a question for you, Andrea.
Okay.
What do you think about the Internet of Things? What will change with the 5G in the next future for jewelry?
Well, if we don't all put on tinfoil hats because we believe 5G is like polluting our brains, then
it's a conspiration.
It's an interesting question. What do I think about Internet of Things? I really just think it's a trend that's going to continue to accelerate.
Okay.
I don't think COVID-19 in any way changes its trajectory, other than maybe to bump it up a little bit.
It probably will be, because I saw the question of Christian said about the robotics usage in jewelry manufacturing. Maybe the Internet of Things with the 5G, so with the high-speed technology connection will help the developing of this kind of manufacturing way to produce jewelry.
I think it will, but I think it's going to have more impact for precision parts than it's going to have for jewelry parts, just because the materials themselves tend to not be precise enough to take advantage of the manufacturing technologies. But I think in general, that's the direction that we're going.
Okay.
But I would like to see more in terms of Internet of Things is quality control in real time in the production cycle. More thermometers in casting systems so we can see when a casting temperature went wrong. More diagnostics at the plating point. If we can maintain plating baths more efficiently, we can reduce the turnover of the bath. That has economic impact and environmental impact and health impact. So if we can incorporate more of that kind of technology in our production cycles, I think we can get faster, smarter, avoid quality problems, and be healthier.
Okay, thank you.
I see some people are typing. Not sure if they're just, okay, do we think it's time? Oh, is it a good time? This is a good question for you, Filippo, though I'm not sure if you're familiar with these gold buying parties. So in 2007 to 2010, as we all know, retailers basically kept themselves afloat by buying gold. So Angelica is asking, do you think it's a good time to host a gold buying party now? If designs are outdated and overdone, maybe smelting old jewelry and repurposing the metal for newer designs is best. But how does that relate to the price of gold right now for the person who's doing the buying?
Yeah, as I told you, this is it's not the all-time high, but it's the 80 years high. So it's a very good price if you need to sell. For sure, you bought at cheaper prices. Okay, so it's a profit for sure. Okay, so in terms of investment, if you bought, you sell now, you may gain.
You buy with price.
Yeah, but you lose the manufacturer, obviously. But in terms of what Andrea told you, said, sure, with the COVID-19, maybe some products, some items will change in terms of fashion, in terms of usage. For example, we are face-to-face. In the future, we'll be face-to-face. So rings, necklaces, probably will be more sold than rings, more sold than anything else. So probably in that case, it's a good question to resmelt and produce new design in line with the new lives that we live now, because we change our way to live. It's changed forever, because until the vaccine, nothing chances to come back again to the normality. So, in my opinion, if you need to sell, this is a very good price. Okay. I cannot say your prices will go up or down, because it's impossible to predict the future, but we can operate on levels. Okay, so what we see now is a good resistance level, and the resistances we sell. Okay, if we need to buy, we need to wait the breach of the resistance. So if the price will go up the resistance, up the level of 1,750, 775, will be a good positive signal that we can wait up to the all-time high. But now we are in resistance. In a resistance, we sell. Okay, or we wait the breach of the resistance that I told you.
Have you seen any evidence of refiners being resistant to taking in small lots of gold while the price is so high, or are they kind of trying to do business as usual? No resistance?
Because you saw that the difference between refineries in gold and other precious metals are the banks. Because in my experience, the selling part of the business was already done. You don't have to figure about how I have to sell gold, because I have 10 bars, I have 12 bars, I have 50 bars of gold. I have the bank that will buy it. So, but banks are market makers, so you don't have any issue to sell to them. Okay.
All right. Well, it looks like we are done. I do still see some typing, but I'm not sure if, I'm not sure when it comes to typing in the chat box, is somebody just typing an email to somebody else, or are they typing a question in our chat box? So I'm going to wrap it up. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to email me. I'll be glad to answer you directly. Filippo, thank you. Oh, there is one last question. Is there any research being done right now with reactive metals like titanium? I don't know of any current research.
I don't know titanium. I honestly never touch it.
No, I mean, you can go into that Santa Fe Symposium collection of papers, and there were a couple of years where really interesting papers were done on the more alternative metals, but I don't know of any research being done on how to work with them. I think how to work with them is pretty well known, and then they're not financial instruments. So, okay, Filippo, thank you so much for joining me for this. I really appreciate it. I know it's Italy. I think it's great for our audience to have access to somebody who just knows the financial and precious metal markets the way you do. So thanks to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Well, we all can get out, right?
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Filippo. Also, thank you very much to MJSA for sponsoring this webinar series and helping me find, all the resources I need to put this on. You guys do a great job. And and I'm speaking for the industry when I say how much we appreciate you. I also appreciate you personally. And with that, I'm going to wrap it for today. And I will hopefully see you guys next Thursday when we talk in more detail about additive manufacturing and where we're going from here. So until then, bye, everybody. Be safe, be healthy. Take care of your mental state right now. Staying in is harder on some people than others, and be confident. Everything will be okay again. It might be different, but it will be okay. So, bye.